Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, January 15th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, hearings on would-be AG William Barr have already started. They're actually ongoing amid his promise to allow the Mueller investigation to proceed, but is that enough? Meanwhile, Republicans shocked to discover Steve King is a racist, and they are mad.
Very upsetting when you find something shocking out like that.
Judge orders the census citizenship question struck from the 2020 census. And the Supreme Court saves the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for the moment. Meanwhile, ACA birth control mandate remains. And Democrats begin investigations into the family separation policy as the shutdown adds 20,000 cases a week to the immigration backlog. Good news. Ice loss from the Antarctica is not 8 times faster than it was 40 years ago. It's only 6 times faster
Everybody take
than
a
it was
breath.
40 years ago.
Don't worry about it.
Phew.
Yeah.
And speaking of the environment, the EPA enforcement is almost non-existent right now, at a record low. We are just hours away from a vote in the British Parliament on a Brexit plan, I guess. Leadership in the UK is basically in the balance. And Rand Paul has escaped to Canada. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen.
Constitution.
Yeah, we will get to that.
He got beat so bad he became a socialist.
We'll also talk about this. Apparently, the 5-alarm fire that is being caused by a razor company, saying that you shouldn't be an a-hole in your daily life. But I mean, this is just, we're in these sort of like this is a weird time for politics right now. It is because the government is shut down. The pain that is being caused by this government shutdown is not clear to most people unless you know a federal worker, and the damage that it's doing to this country is not obvious. It's like one of those kidney punches, right? Like it starts to cause problems like 2 or 3 weeks later, and that's what we're going through now. The implications of this. I had a piece the other day from the Norman paper in Oklahoma or something, talking about how the local services for battered women and women and children who are victims of domestic violence, they were starting to have to lay off support staff to help folks like this. And so it is always people at the margins who feel this pain first. And we go about our daily lives, aren't necessarily aware of it. And it won't be until we get another couple of weeks where the TSA and maybe the air traffic controllers start to say, like, you know what, I'm sick, I can't come into work today. Where we will start to hear about it. And mark my words on this. When plane travel starts to be constrained, we will hear a lot more about it, because that's when wealthy people start to be aware of this stuff. And if someone, God forbid, somebody gets super sick from a lack of sort of the consistent FDA inspections. I mean, they're apparently going to be putting inspectors on and deem them as necessary workers for the most high-risk foods. But broadly speaking, you know, the reason why you do consistent investigations and scrutiny of the food system, even in the low-risk foods, is that sometimes something happens. But mark my words, when the plane travel starts to be impinged, that's when you'll start to hear about it more. And I imagine local level, you know, if you live in Iowa or you live in Kansas, you're reading about the farmers are starting to have problems. I would imagine like everybody's got a story around this around the country. But in terms of it being a national story, of course, these things are all regional. That's the whole point of it. It won't be until you get to something like plane travel, because that becomes it's literally a way that the nation is connected, and wealthy people experience it directly. I mean, you'd hear about it if refund checks are late. That you'll also hear about. But but in the meantime, it ends up being a culture war. And we end up seeing freak shows like the President of the United States. And look, I don't care that the President of the United States loves fast food. Great. And I don't care about a football team that thought they, got excited about going to visit the White House, and they basically end up going through the drive-through. I mean, that seems like a drag. But,
like Castle House.
Yeah, but I don't care. Really about that. But this is a freak show. I mean, I'm sorry. We're looking at this golden candelabra and these Big Macs or whatever it is stacked up on these
quarter pounders, on these
silver trays. And Donald Trump is sitting there like beaming with pride. And I mean, this is I don't even know what to say.
The party of Lincoln.
Friggin' rules.
It's the party of Lincoln.
He finally gets to fulfill his destiny as a burger sommelier.
You watch like things like for people who watch Game of Thrones, they had this the Mad King was a storyline, and you're just like, how does stuff like that happen? And then to be living it.
How many nuggets does the Mad King have?
That's
Now, what's your favorite thing here, Mr. President?
I like it all. It's all good stuff.
Do you
great American food.
Pause it for 1 second. I'm also like, I'll tell you
something.
Very
stable, very legal, very cool.
There were some moves that Anthony Adamrick had on the President show that I felt were like caricatures of Trump. And Trump, with his pivoting here, sort of just like swiveling back and forth as if his neck is doesn't have the ability to move. He moves his whole body. I keep seeing more and more of Anthony Adamrick in the president. I feel like the president is becoming the caricature.
It was a good
See at the end of this evening how many are left.
Do you prefer McDonald's or Wendy's?
I like them all.
That's a tough question.
If
not
it's
a softball.
American, I like it. It's all American stuff. But it's good stuff. And we have the national champion team, as you know, Clemson Tigers. And they had a fantastic game against Alabama. And they're all here. They're right outside the room. And I think we're going to let you see them. But I'll bet you as much food as we have. We have pizzas. We have 300 hamburgers. Many, many French fries.
Many French fries.
All of our favorite foods.
Probably too many to count.
I can't go. When we leave, because I don't think it's going to be much. The reason we did this is because of the shutdown. We want to make sure that everything is right. So we sent out, we got this, and we have some wonderful people working at the White House. They helped us out with this. And I will say the Republicans are really, really sticking together. It's great to see because we need border security. We have to have it. We have to have it, no doubt about it. Should have happened 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. And it's going to happen now. It's going to happen now. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Enjoy your food.
Thanks,
Enjoy the slop that we have presented to you.
Of course.
Oh, hell yeah.
Where else could you go, though? Like, in my mind, the obvious analog is Obama shutting down the government to, like, expel European immigrants and then inviting, like, some, like, African soccer teams over for, like, tahini. So, like, we got tapuli, we got grape leaves, we got hummus. I tell you what, we should have gotten rid of people from Norway a long time ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. But we're going to do it. Democrats are sticking together, even the devils. And what do you like better, Yemeni food or Iranian food? It's all good. Love it all. All comes from Muslim countries. It's all great.
If you think that's weird, just wait till he appoints the Hamburglar to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, exactly. It's
all great food. It's all great.
These guys, the players come in, and you can hear one of them say, "I thought this was a joke." Because they showed up and someone clearly said, "Look, guys, we've got a ton of fast food for you." And they're all like, "We didn't come all the way to the way." I guess we did.
I thought it was a joke.
I got 3 burgers that I could only get if I had about $12 and went down the street and got into the drive-thru. Here is Anthony Adamanick as Donald Trump. Where'd it go? Did you get it?
Yeah, why would Trump ever joke about that? Like, this is his favorite stuff right here. It's finally his time to shine.
Now, the best thing about Wendy's is it's square. And when it's square, you get the meat, you get more burger. You want to get down and dirty, get some Burger King. That's when Mama's not home to watch you. Mama's not home. And you know you can get dirty with him.
He's just a little baby.
I'm gonna throw up.
So disgusting.
I'm gonna throw up.
Oh, Jesus.
No, I'm not.
Oh, my God. I'm sorry, folks.
That should have come with a warning.
Yeah.
Today was the day Donald Trump became president.
Indeed.
We got tabbouleh, we got hummus, we got lebna.
Folks, it's 2019. Are you still doing things the old way at work? Start the year off by replacing that software that caused you angst and agony every day. And find software that fits your business needs using Capterra.com. Capterra is the leading free online resource to help you find the best software solution for your business. They have over 700,000 reviews of products from real software users. It has everything you need to make an informed decision. This is the kind of thing that I fetishize, like review sites.
This is what I thought when I saw the ad. I said, "Oh, Sam fetishizes services like
It's
that."
true. Any products I recommend, anything, I go and I read a ton of reviews. You can search more than 700 specific categories of software, everything from project management to email marketing to yoga studio management software, everything.
Nice.
No matter what kind of software your business needs, Capterra makes it easy to discover the right solution fast. Join millions of people who use Capterra each month to find the right tools for their business. Visit Capterra.com/majority for free today to find the right tools to make 2019 the year for your business. Capterra.com/majority. That's Capterra. CAPTERRA.com/majority. And as always, it's more than a pleasure to tell you about the New Yorker. It literally is something that I brag to my parents about. The New Yorker advertises on the show. It represents the best writing in America today, both online and print. New Yorker covers a full range of topics: politics, news, international affairs, climate change, popular culture, fiction, arts, food, movies, theater, cartoons. Not to mention, New Yorker touches on subjects that many readers may not have previously put much thought into, like the world's diminishing supply of sand, paper jams, stink bugs, hunting down heirloom beans. Last night, I read The Art of Decision Making, which is their lead story. It's sort of fascinating. One of those things where, I end up reading it and then I'm going to read it twice, I think. It also has incredible writers that you are undoubtedly aware of. Ronan Farrow, who, of course, broke those massive stories about Harvey Weinstein and Les Moonves. Helen Rosner, a James Beard award-winning food writer who contributes essays and reports and stories, all things gastronomique. They just did a big story on Tulsi Gabbard.
That was everybody should read. I'm forgetting the author's name, but the profile on Tulsi Gabbard is really great. And of course, Jane Meyer's there, the mayor, and
Isaac Chotiner, who's really interesting interviewer. You can read a lot of his interviews in print, but he wrote a piece on how global warming changes international relations. There's what else did I mean? There is how the garage became America's favorite room is on there. And, when you talk about design, tons of stuff constantly. Well, they got a story on how, The Apprentice basically puffed up Donald Trump by somebody who worked there. All sorts of stuff that you can read from the New Yorker. And now our listeners can save 50% and get 12 weeks of the New Yorker for just $6. All you got to do is go to newyorker.com/majority and enter majority. You'll also get an exclusive tote, as well as unlimited access to New Yorker's apps, online archive, crossword puzzle, and newyorker.com with 10 to 15 exclusive site-only stories every day. That's newyorker.com/majority. Enter the code majority. Get 12 weeks of the New Yorker for $6. Folks, do the math. That's 50 cents a week. That's crazy. All right. I want to dig in just to a couple of things about the William Barr hearings. I mean, look, the fact is that William Barr is a smarter Jeff Sessions. And the only question is, and by that I mean in terms of like race.
Everybody's smarter than Jeff.
Jeff's an idiot.
Jeff's dumb. He's a hick. I hate him.
Bill Barr is, if you enjoyed the idea that cops were able to basically have free reign and there would be no oversight of the way that cops treat marginal communities, minority communities, really across the board, well, then you're going to like Bill Barr. But that elections have consequences. And this is what came in with Donald Trump and with the Republicans, frankly, particularly the even more racialized Republican Party as we have today. the big issues in terms of Barr, of course, are things like, hey, if Donald Trump, and recall that Rex Tillerson said, sort of like as a joke, but not really, I had to tell Trump not to do illegal things all the time, right? That is the reporting that comes out. The question is will a guy like Bill Barr also remind Donald Trump you can't do things illegally? Because once Bill Barr comes in here, there's a good chance we're going to see a wholesale cleaning house. And so there's not going to be many sane people left in there. And Bill Barr also wrote an 18-page memo to Donald Trump, unsolicited. Some people call it a job application, where he basically outlined why it was impossible for there to be obstruction because collusion is not a crime. Now, of course, that's not what Donald Trump is going to be charged with, if he's charged with anything, or if he can be charged. But the idea that obstruction cannot exist unless there's an underlying crime, well, you can't prove an underlying crime a lot of times because of obstruction. You can't say, well, you can't arrest me for the bank robbery because I drove the getaway car so well that you couldn't catch me.
Exactly. Logic.
Anyways, he wrote this a 19-page unsolicited memo, and the key questions are: will Barr interfere with the investigation? Will Barr interfere with the release of the results? Will Barr, if Donald Trump says, it's time to arrest Hillary Clinton. I mean, these are legitimate questions.
Not that far off. I'm laughing because,
it's
that's
possibly true.
Exactly.
Here is Bill Barr. This is his opening statements, right? Here we go. Listen to this.
First, I believe it is vitally important that the special counsel be allowed to complete his investigation. I have known Bob Mueller for 30 years. We worked closely together throughout my previous tenure at the Department of Justice. We've been friends since, and I have the utmost respect for Bob and his distinguished record of public service. And when he was named special counsel, I said his selection was good news, and that knowing him, I had confidence he would handle the matter properly, and I still have that confidence today. Given his public actions to date, I expect that the special counsel is well along in his investigation. At the same time, the president has been steadfast that he was not involved in any collusion with Russian attempts to interfere in the election. I believe it is in the best interest of everyone, the president, Congress, and the American people, that this matter be resolved by allowing the special counsel to complete his work. The country needs a credible resolution to these issues. And if confirmed, I will not permit partisan politics, personal interests, or any other improper consideration to interfere with this or any other investigation. I will follow the special counsel regulations scrupulously and in good faith, and on my watch, Bob will be allowed to finish his work.
You know, that would have been a great opportunity to say, and we will release this information to the public so the public will see the results of this investigation regardless of what it is. That's where you would have added that if that's what your intention was. So it's quite possible that over the past couple of months, 6 months ago, that when Bill Barr wrote that unsolicited 19-page memo saying it's impossible to find the president guilty, not even legally speaking, but that there is no, it's not even a question of fact, this investigation. The investigation itself is impossible to find a violation by the president. Even if he's had has reconsidered that perspective. The real question is, are we going to hear about it? Because it sounds to me like they have basically figured out a plan B. And plan B is to just basically suck this investigation down the drain. You finish, and when you're done, thank you, goodbye. We'll just put it in the we'll put it in a file cabinet. Here is Leahy asking more about that.
If confirmed, are both seeking and following the advice of the department's career ethics officials.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pause it. I'm sorry. In this instance, right? The question's going to be, so Patrick Leahy, and this is what happened with Whitaker, and this is what happened with Jeff Sessions. There is an internal agency, essentially, within the DOJ. It's a committee, subcommittee, made up of officials at the DOJ who assess whether there is a conflict of interest or an appearance of conflict of interest, which would require various officials to recuse themselves. Jeff Sessions, it was recommended to him by this ethics committee, recuse yourself. This is an internal DOJ committee. You'll recall last time Marcy Wheeler was on, she anticipated that this committee, made up of like 4 or 5 senior DOJ officials, would tell Matt Whitaker to recuse himself. And then Matt Whitaker announced, they said, I'm okay. And it wasn't until like 3 or 4 weeks later that we hear the reporting that, in fact, no, he was told he should recuse himself. So the question becomes, with Bill Barr, if it's determined by other DOJ officials that because of your position in the past, it is best for, at the very least, the optics, so that the American public can have confidence that the investigation's not being manipulated or buried or interfered with or underfunded or whatever it is, that you recuse yourself. Will you listen, unlike Matt Whitaker, to the recommendations of these members of the Department of Justice? Here's the question.
If confirmed, are both seeking and following the advice of the department's career ethics officials on whether you must recuse from the special counsel's investigation.
I will seek the advice of the career ethics personnel, but under the regulations, I make the decision as the head of the agency as to my own recusal. So I certainly would consult with them, and at the end of the day, I would make a decision in good faith based on the laws and the facts that are evident at that time.
Same thing if you're talking about a conflict of interest?
Well, no, some conflicts, as you know, are mandatory.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and there's also obviously another way that you could have responded to this. I will give deference to that committee. They will have a priority. It's conceivable that I would disagree with what they would say, but I would show deference to them, but not I'm just going to listen to them when they give their proclamation.
Everybody gets a say, man.
That's right.
I'll hear them, and I hear you right now. Everybody talks. Everybody shares their feelings, brah.
In other words, there's no commitment from this guy that he's going to not be essentially corrupt.
Oh, excuse me. Pardon me, sir. I just gave you a commitment to listen, I believe.
That's right. He's going to go on a listening tour. This is a guy who submitted a 19-page memo saying that there is no even construction in which you could be considered guilty because the charges themselves don't even, they can't, even if true, they can't be true. Even if you obstructed, it would not be possible for you to obstruct.
Well, I am totally willing to hear you out on that.
Now, he's going to, he's going to be the next AG. But
He does seem quite a bit more savvy than Sessions. I
Right.
mean, you know, he could. I mean, who knows? Maybe he'll be totally shambolic the next couple of weeks, and I'll stand corrected.
Yeah.
But he does seem a lot more kind of adroit at manipulating this process.
It's not inconceivable. I mean, you know, these days, it's not inconceivable that, you know, this guy's a former Reagan official, George Herbert Walker Bush official. Maybe some of these old-line Republicans said, oh, do the old write a 19-page memo trick where it sounds like you'll totally be on board. We can sell him on you. And then you get in there and you actually function like a, you know, a real attorney general, a real Republican one who's just going to use the power of the office to make sure that black people don't have any redress.
You know, I'm really sick of people coming in here and only targeting black people. And that's not my problem. Obviously, targeting black people is great. But at a certain point, you need to take care of numero uno.
Exactly.
And first, Mr. Magoo, the dumb inbred guy, doesn't do it. And now he writes a whole 19-page memo, and all of a sudden, I'm still being harassed. This is really unfair. Now I know what it feels like to be a black guy, ironically. Totally unfair.
Meanwhile, the Republicans have discovered that Steve King is racist. And this is sort of fascinating when you see the implications of the Democrats taking the House. Mitch McConnell has stated as of yesterday there is no place in the Republican Party, the Congress, or the country for an ideology of racial supremacy of any kind. Representative King's statements are unwelcome and unworthy of his elected position. As you know, this is huge breaking news that Stephen King is now a racist, apparently. This is huge breaking news, particularly since only 3 months ago. Well, here's a picture of, who's it? That's not McConnell with Steve King. That's just, you know, when this guy tells you that you've got a racist problem, you know you have a problem. But let's look in on Chuck Grassley, who only 3 months ago said Steve King was great. It's amazing the transformation that Stephen King has had. Like, what happened in the past 3 months that made this guy turn so horrible? I mean, just 3 months ago, here was Chuck Grassley basically having a stroke. I mean, endorsing Steve King.
Iowa needs Steve King in Congress. I also need Steve King in Congress.
Pause it for 1 second.
That actually sounds really. I am like.
I know
don't
it's a little bit upsetting,
that,
but let's go back to the beginning here and just like here's a tip for all of you congressional staffers who listen to the program, watch the show. If you're going to videotape your boss and put it on the web, you have two options. One is you either cut out the part where you go 3, 2, 1, or you use your fingers. See, that's why, like, I mean, if you were counting down from, let's say, 36, this would be uncomfortable. But you're doing 3, 2,
1. Iowa needs Steve King in Congress. I also need Steve King in Congress. I feel like I do a good job of representing Iowans. And so often, I have found Steve King to be such an ally that I need in the other body called the House of Representatives. He's worked with so many things that are important to Iowa, agricultural issues, the Farm Bill, alternative energy, things that are very important to Iowa, like wind energy particularly. Oh, and ethanol and biodiesel as well. Without his help in the House of Representatives, Iowa.
All right, he goes on and on. We don't need to hear this.
Ethanol,
the point is,
energy, protecting white babies. What?
Now they
restart.
Kevin McCarthy, or Steve McCarthy, as we like to call him, has said that King will not be sitting on will not get any committee appointments. The big deal for this is right there in Grassley's comments, because King will no longer be on the Agriculture Committee, which means that he will no longer be able to offer all sorts of bennies for Iowans and big ag there. And so this is going to if he's not reinstated, and I don't think he will be, he will lose in a Republican primary.
And he's already got, I think a couple weeks ago, some local Iowa Republican announced he was going to take him on.
Yeah.
And it was all like, you know, this is tasteless, but like it's a distraction, it's embarrassing, and now you got the, you know, now there's the meat to fill it in.
Right.
He'll be knocked out, and he'll be.
It must have been really a big surprise for all these Republicans to find out that Steve King was such a jerk.
It's shocking.
It's a shame they couldn't have found that out before the election, and they could have worked with us to get him out of office.
Yeah, but you know, the information comes fast. I'm sure Steve King will, like, you know, make a nice living, like addressing like European like fascist soccer clubs and stuff. Like he's got a whole
WorldNet Daily has already started to build his set, I think.
Right.
But here's the interesting part. There's a lot of people who are probably wondering, like, why now? And it is because the Democrats have the ability to control the agenda in the House. And that makes Steve King more of a liability than he was 2 months ago. And they had the ability to vote to censure him, which would have kept it in the news. And the Republicans thought, okay, this is the definition of this guy taking one for the team. And it also gives us an opportunity to talk about Rashida Tlaib and the fact that the Democrats won't censure her for saying mofo.
Well, and also she said that Arab civilization can't be saved with gypsy babies.
That's right.
And that because we created fucking algebra was, I believe, the direct quote. And just because she thinks that the Arabs are particularly blessed by Allah doesn't mean that she thinks that Allah's other creations aren't valid, but just inferior.
Right.
So I think we need to be really fair here
Right.
about what she actually said. I love how my Rashida Tlaib is also just Jimmy Dore.
Right, exactly.
We created fucking algebra, you fucking sellouts.
I mean, this is it. I mean, it's basically, look, they are in a they are on the back of their heels because they're getting blamed for the shutdown. They did not want the twin sort of like recommendations of being coddling to a racist and also denying basic services to Americans.
Oh, I thought you were saying to be coddling coddling to a racist and coddling to a racist.
It takes two to tango.
That's right.
Don't forget.
Yeah, we're all implicated in this too because we all heard what Stephen King said, and if we hadn't heard what he said, then would he have said it?
Right. On one hand, Steve King is saying absolutely racist things. On the other hand, a lot of Democrats are hearing what he's saying. So there's a lot on both sides of this, Kathy. Back to you.
Just briefly, judge orders the Trump administration to remove the 2020 census citizenship question. You remember this story? A question was added to the 2020 census, which would have been about the citizenship status of someone in the census. Now, look, the census is a constitutionally mandated exercise, and it is specifically to count all the people in the United States, not all the citizens, not all the adults, not all the Americans, all the people in the United States. And when you ask a question about citizenship, it scares off a lot of people. This was a question that the census people did not want to put in there. It was a question that came, or I should say, rather, it was a question that came from the political, not from any, there was no valid reason to put it in. U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York has been hearing the lawsuit over this. Apparently, it's anticipated that this may go to the Supreme Court. Wilbur Ross testified, or at least in written testimony. It's basically been showing that the administration has been misleading the public. They misused Ross, that is, misused his authority over the census and discriminated against immigrant communities of color. It's not the end of this, but it is another indication or another example of why the federal judiciary is important. Here's another one. There are two judges that, one in California, one in Pennsylvania, both federal judges, which have at least temporarily blocked Trump administration rules that would limit the ability of some women to get birth control at no charge. The idea was that Trump administration was expanding the principle in the Hobby Lobby case to not just religion, but moral qualms with people, women taking birth control. And so the methodology that the Obama administration had come up with in doing workarounds where the companies would not have to touch the money, would not have to pay extra money. Well, they weren't going to pay extra money anyways, but would not have to touch the money that would go to the insurance company that would offer this as a benefit.
That is the most milquetoast liberal thing I've ever heard.
Well, they had to get around the Supreme Court.
I know, it's just funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous, but there's no other means in which to do it. The other means to do it would, of course, been to not have health insurance in any way tied to employers. But they had worked out a workaround where a third-party insurer would cover birth control even if the employer did not. Because when you get health insurance from employers, it's the employers who pay for it. And so that was the workaround. The Trump administration wanted to end that, and two federal judges, both appointed by Barack Obama, have at the very least, enjoined the administration from doing that in the meantime. Also, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday denied cert. In other words, they're not going to look at the case brought by a Texas bank saying that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was unconstitutional because the president cannot fire the director without cause. The court didn't hear it because Kavanaugh is recused because he heard a similar case at the circuit level. It would have been 4-4. It wasn't worth their time. They're going to wait till they get another case that Kavanaugh can rule on in this instance. Not necessarily a bad thing, because by the time this case gets up there, you'll have a Democratic president, hopefully, who could then fire Donald Trump's head of Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. But the Republicans hate this agency. It was set up very deftly by Elizabeth Warren. So in anticipating this being an agency that was going to be the subject of Republican ire and not just Republican, but the banking industry. And so it was set up in such a way that it was self-funding and could not be attacked easily. And it has worked. From an administrative standpoint, it was sort of a brilliant structure. Just got a little bit of time here. So I want to talk about this ridiculously stupid Jonathan Chait piece.
Here we go. May I say, go off, King.
Well, okay.
Okay.
So Jonathan Chait, I don't know. This is just, I've never seen anything this sort of nakedly stupid. by someone who is ostensibly respected by the, I think, an increasingly smaller and narrower band of people. I mean, at one point, Jonathan Chait, who is ostensibly a Democratic partisan, is going to end up being a member of the sort of the Bill Kristol never Trumper.
Never AOCer?
Yeah, I mean, oh, well, without a doubt.
Or they'll join the Democratic Party.
But he's attacked Elizabeth Warren. And he writes, the concerns I have, well, here's the headline. What happens when Elizabeth Warren sells out to powerful interests?
Now, may I ask a question? So is he doing a hypothetical scenario where Elizabeth Warren caves to the credit card industry and she reverses herself on the history of her advocacy of financial reform? Is that what he's talking about?
When I saw the headline, I was like, that, yeah, people will be bummed. Or maybe he's talking about, like, what happens when she has to compromise on something? Are the, purity trolls going to have a bitch? And I was like, I'm not reading another one of those dumb Jonathan Chait things that are like hippie punching, because that's usually what he writes, right? Like, and so I was bored at that, but I didn't realize how stupid this piece could be. So he writes, the concerns I have about Warren as a policymaker are not the issues she talks about, but the issues she doesn't. Here are two issues where I believe Warren has done the wrong thing. There's a common theme here. They challenge and complicate her populist appeal. Now, the reason why he picks two things is because he wants to launder one of them. The first is the medical device tax. One of the ways the Affordable Care Act was funded was via the medical device tax. And the Democrats, when they controlled the Senate under Obama, were coming very close to repealing the medical device tax. Al Franken was one of the people who wanted to do that because Minnesota has a big medical device industry. Guess what else does? Massachusetts.
Lots of devices.
This repeal of the medical device tax, right, particularly in the shadow now of a $1.5 trillion giveaway to corporate taxes, or the Chuck Schumer plan to repatriate offshore taxes, is negligible. Is it something that I am in favor of? Absolutely not. But the idea that this has been sticking in Jonathan Chait's crotch or craw or whatever it is, wherever he's been keeping it for this time, is impossible. The idea that this is some type of deal breaker that people are going to care about in this day and age, the medical device tax, after there's been a $1.5 trillion corporate tax giveaway, after the repatriation which Chuck Schumer and Hillary Clinton and Paul Ryan had planned, as per Chuck Schumer's bragging in October of 2016, is just absurd. It's absurd. And I love the fact that he leads with it because he thinks he's being clever. Because what's his real agenda? What he's really concerned about is, now this is something that she's co-sponsored legislation to repeal the medical device tax. She's written an op-ed advocating the tax repeal for the industry's own newsletter and proposed a bill that would penalize manufacturers of pharmaceuticals, but crucially not the medical device industry, for misappropriating funds intended for scientific research. So in other words, she has been really good at going after big pharma, which is actually, one of the bigger problems. But not so much with the medical device industry. We're splitting hairs here, particularly based upon what issues this guy's had in the past. But whatever. I agree with him. We shouldn't have a repeal of the medical device tax. But this is like the idea that this would derail Elizabeth Warren. This is sort of like a version of Bernie Sanders and guns if guns were a wholly irrelevant issue to the entire country. But then there was another thing too. Now that I'm writing this piece, I'm going to write another thing about it. Education reform.
So a valid, although unbelievably narrow objection to set the stage for the real aim of the piece.
Right. Which is that Elizabeth Warren has sold out to powerful interests. In this instance, the teachers, the national teachers.
Dun, dun, dun.
A very, very small constituency of the Democratic Party. Right? Like, this guy, even if this guy had written this 5 years ago, it would have seemed awkward. But right now, it's just incredibly tone deaf and stupid. There may be no state in America that can more clearly showcase the clear success of charter schools than Warren's home state of Massachusetts. Professors Sarah Cohodes and Susan Dynarski conducted a study proving the massive gains produced by charter school students in the Bay State. Because Massachusetts has a cap on the number of students allowed to attend charters, its students have to enter a lottery to apply. This allowed Cohodes and Dynarski to compare the performance of students who won the lottery with those who lost, a perfectly randomized sample across a broad suite of metrics. The students who won the lottery and attended a charter outperformed the lottery losers in every way: state test scores, SAT scores, number of advanced placement classes, test scores in those classes, and college attendance. Okay? Let's just stipulate that this study was done perfectly well and is accurate. That those people who applied for the lottery and got in and went to the charter schools did better than those who applied for the lottery and didn't get in. And so you are eliminating at least the control of parents who are equally motivated to be involved in their kids' education. You can't necessarily make up for maybe the disappointment that the parents feel, and maybe they're a little bit less engaged in the kids. But let's just let that ride, okay? Let's just imagine that is a perfect test, and you can measure that. The gains were equally large or larger for low-income students who entered school with low test scores, et cetera, et cetera. The charter sector would like to admit more students in Massachusetts, but the state has a cap preventing more students from enrolling. There was a state referendum in 2016 to increase the cap. And the teachers union spearheaded the opposition to this measure. And Warren also joined that opposition to question 2, which he writes crushed the chance for thousands of low-income urban students in Massachusetts to have a chance at a great education and a future in college. Okay, now, first of all, his characterization, that last line there, it did not crush the chance for thousands of low-income urban students in Massachusetts to have a chance at great education and a future in college, because the thing that he also doesn't mention is that public schools in Massachusetts outperform all other schools around the country. So while, even if we stipulate this study is absolutely accurate, there's no indication that these people, that these students in the public schools didn't have the same opportunity to get into colleges or have a future. That's not what the study measures. The study measures SAT scores, certain percentage increase in SAT scores, and certain skill sets. A. B, what he doesn't mention about Massachusetts charter schools is that they are unique in that Massachusetts has an incredible amount of control as a state over the authorization of these schools, over the accreditation of these schools, over the entire process of these schools. Massachusetts has a better system to deal with charters. There's a lot of research that also suggests the reason why charters do well in Massachusetts is because the public schools themselves do well. Because there's already a large foundation for public schooling in Massachusetts. And thereby the charters are platformed on that. But the other reality is that every time you put money into a charter school, what you're doing is you're taking money out of the public schools. So there very well could be a point of diminishing returns. Charter schools are not set up to be an alternate form of education in a locale. It's supposed to be a mechanism in which to provide a laboratory to enhance public education so that ideas can be dealt with in charter schools that may have a little bit more flexibility, but then be scaled up. It is not meant to be a replacement for public schools. And the fact is that there is certainly a time without a cap. There's certainly a point where you start to undercut public schools for all students. Not to mention the fact that that's important because charter schools, even if it's lottery, don't take the same array of students that the public schools do. You still have rules and where people can be kicked out of. Even if Massachusetts charter schools are not like the vast majority of charter schools, which are for-profit. Because the for-profit ones are not allowed in Massachusetts. The reality is they do inhibit the quality of public schools. And there is, like I say, a lot of evidence that shows to the extent that you have charter schools succeed in a place like New Jersey or Massachusetts, it's a function of the underlying public school system. So if you start robbing Peter to pay Paul, Paul's actually going to start doing worse as well. Not to mention all the other apostles who aren't allowed to get into the charter school.
Yeah, but they break the power of those greedy teachers unions.
Well, that turns out to be the sellout to the powerful interest. Now, mind you, the money on the pro-charter side was much bigger. So the problem Elizabeth Warren has is she sells out to the lower bidder.
You just imagine a teacher like rolling a gold-plated pencil across the desk towards her like, here, have this apple.
Exactly. My concern is what these issues tell us about Warren as a policymaker. She has done an effective job of mobilizing public opinion against the finance industry, which has many nefarious impacts on public policy. Oh, incidentally, the biggest contributors to this charter movement, because they know there's tons of money to be made in the other states. Even if Massachusetts at this moment does not allow for-profit charter schools, there's tons of money for these big financiers to make in other states. Hedge funds are deep into the charter movement. But presidents have to deal with all the issues, and many of them have organized lobbyists defending terrible policies that fly under radar. There's no such thing as a perfectly pure politician, of course. But from my standpoint, medical device tax repeal and the Massachusetts charter cap, I mean, the entire ACA is founded on such compromises. And the idea that the medical device repeal is the one that really sticks out in his mind is just laughable.
It definitely was not the lack of a public option. That was not it. Definitely not it.
Or,
it was
the lack of negotiating with drug prices with pharmaceuticals.
No. Keep your eye on the ball.
Or the
it's
idea
the medical device
of
tax, dude.
Massive subsidies to the insurance companies. The whole thing was a compromise bill.
Do you have some money tied up in a Worcester medical device company that you're downplaying
Maybe,
this mega
maybe
issue?
I do. But from my standpoint, the medical device tax repeal and the Massachusetts charter cap are especially unjustifiable policies. First of all, the fact that charter schools in Massachusetts do marginally better than public schools for kids, even if that was provable, does not mean that capping how many students go into charter schools is a bad policy. That just doesn't follow. On Twitter, Chait was questioned about this. Like, dude, there were two powerful interests. one that had more money than the other, and she went with the one that had the less money in this fight in Massachusetts. And his response was fascinating insight. It's behind there. It's behind the razor one. See it on the left? Oh no, I guess it isn't. Sorry. His response was fascinating, and it was fascinating because he doesn't realize what a cell phone it is. Aside from it being something that he writes, so someone says to him, he's talking about, incidentally, the forces that were for this were hit with the largest fine in state campaign history for illegally hiding the identities of its billionaire donors. And Ben Mathis Lilly says, if it's selling out to the powerful to not support that group, it seems like maybe selling out is not the right frame for that issue. And Chait says the interest group in this issue holds power over Warren's political future is the teachers union. If it was a Republican, the calculus would be different. The donors to the charter schools may be rich, but their interest in this issue is philanthropic, making it quite different than an interest group protecting its own income. Now, here's, aside from that being astronomically disingenuous.
Couple of Pinocchios there.
A couple of Pinocchios, okay? Because the donors to charter schools in Massachusetts and the charter school, first of all, they're not donating to the charter schools. They're donating to a political action committee or trying to expand charters.
It's a commons they want to privatize, you dense moron.
And they want to do this in other states where they make a ton of money. But even if we were to believe that the reason why these billionaires are all giving money to the charter movement because it's a philanthropic endeavor, and that they are giving the money not to the charter schools themselves, and of course not to public schools with no strings attached, but to the political action committee supporting charters, even if we were completely moronic enough to believe this last part, making it quite different than an interest group protecting its own income. What he's saying is that when you're talking about protecting your own income and you're advocating for something, that is extremely suspicious. That is extremely suspicious. And so when you have a scenario where someone's advocating for something like that and their income is in any way involved, you should not take what they're saying seriously or at being in any way an honest reflection of their opinion. Well, sadly, Jonathan Chait's wife works for charter schools.
My wife! You didn't sell my wife honor. This is the same guy who was like, oh, I can't believe we unionized. My current boss is the nicest boss I ever had.
I happen to believe that it's possible that the teachers, even though the teachers union, even though it would protect their own income, that they actually have the education of students in mind. That's a big reason why you go into education. But
you go there for the cold, hard currency.
This is the George Mason economics also, by the way. This public choice theory sort of
thing. Right,
yeah.
Of course.
This is all that is.
Oh, yeah.
Which is doubly ironic because the only...
But she worked for a charter school, for a charter
school
network.
public value...
Wildly irresponsible of New York Magazine not to make him disclose that in this piece.
Yes, absolutely. Every time he writes about charter schools, he should be saying that.
Like, I'm not the kind of scab to try to tweet at someone's employer in an effort to get them fired. But if I'd scab on anyone, it would probably be Jonathan Chait because he's also a scab.
Yeah, he's already scabbed earlier this fall.
You scab, you get.
Who scabs the scabs?
We are scab, but also the only thing Jonathan Chait has ever done that has any credibility is, writing, frankly, pretty easy pieces about why libertarian economics is delusional. And here he is forwarding it in the entire public education arena without disclosing a massive conflict of interest.
Well, one that he actually believes is necessarily a conflict of interest, right? You can't possibly advocate for something that protects your income in any fashion.
Oh, he's such a dumbass.
It's unbelievable.
If we're going to cherry pick statistics, maybe we should talk about all of the studies that found charter schools have often horrible racial disparities in their punishment of students.
That's simply a fact. It's they have disparities in that regard. They don't have the same obligations around the country to let in all sorts of students from public schools. They don't outperform, broadly speaking, across the nation, public schools. So the idea that Massachusetts is limiting the number of charter schools, the idea that that is inherently a bad policy is just absurd. It's just absurd. It's not, and particularly in the context of criticizing her as a national candidate.
Yeah, this whole piece is bloated with neoliberal ideology, right?
Well, this whole piece
that's
is
the best thing you could say about it.
Yeah, this whole piece is a good reminder of, even as I prefer Bernie and critique her, the really admirable parts of Elizabeth Warren's record.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, thanks. If you're Warren, send him a champagne. Send him a cigar.
This Jonathan Chait piece is so bad that it has occurred to me that Warren's people paid him to write it. It's it's that bad.
My respect levels for Warren's people and Jonathan Chait would skyrocket if that was the case.
He could very well be a secret, huge proponent of Elizabeth Warren and realize, I got to take one for the team. This is the only way I can help.
Could you write a massively, unbelievably, just embarrassingly stupid piece without disclosing a conflict of interest for us? All right.
Sure.
You know what? The mission is more important than my ego.
That's all I can do.
So New York Magazine just unionized, and that's pretty cool.
Oh, just this moment?
Very recently.
Oh, yeah.
And he was crying about it.
Oh, yeah.
And
he was upset
when
about
that happened, I said, hey, you know what, guys? You just unionized. Why don't we bring back a little social unionism, a little social consciousness to your union demands? So in addition to, better wages, better benefits, whatever, I think it would be to the benefit of everyone in society if you make firing Jonathan Chait one of your demands in your contract. So
that would be pretty
we'll see how that goes.
All right. We got to take a break, head into the fun half. We will have aerial footage for the first day of the LA teachers strike, which was pretty impressive. Well, we got a couple more things to talk about.
Got some good Rand Paul stuff coming.
Yeah, we got some Rand Paul.
Constitution. We might have a Roots Rand Paul.
Take your number, your phone call, 646-257-3920. I'm turning on the phone system now. Also, your IMs. Reminder, this program exists because of our members. You can become a member at jointhemajority.com. Tomorrow, I think we're going to play the live show that we did on Sunday. So you will be able to hear that and maybe see that. And we decided to release it to everybody. Why not? And just a reminder, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Oh, members, I should say, also to this program, get the show commercial free. So no ads for you. Today is Tuesday. That is the Michael Brooks show day. And as such, there will be a Michael Brooks show tonight. Is that correct, Michael?
Indeed. Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks, our friend, will be joining us.
She's not. Is she be in studio?
No, she'll be over the phone. And we're also going to, of course, talk about the news coming out of Brexit. And also get into Francis Fox Piven's Regulating the Poor and how it relates to understanding the government shutdown, a bunch of other stuff. And the Majority Report live show was incredibly fun, and it was an honor to meet people and come out and see the TMBS live show February 1st. Get your tickets today.
That's a 7 p.m. show,
7
right?
p.m. show.
On a Friday night.
On a Friday night.
Little drinking going on.
Get it started. And actually, I think after the show's over, there's a dance party that the Bell House hosts. So you could really just stay there and have a great night. So, yeah, come to the show. We're streaming live at the Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel starting at around 7-ish.
And, Jamie, what's happening with the Antifada?
So this week, for our patrons only, we have a real Poly Hours in which we break down an article from QZ.com about the polyamorous community. And And you know what? I'm going to leave it a little vague until you listen. What our take is on it. Is polyamory bourgeois decadence that only serves to aggrandize our tech bro overlords? Or is it a totally normal and fine life choice that
Here's my impression of
everyone
Sean.
should leave us alone about?
People should be in monogamous relationships and not ever stray sexually because it's counter-revolutionary.
I guess you'll see.
of the show.
I guess you'll see if that's accurate or not. We also recorded an episode about this very crazy Trotsky series on Netflix, which actually kind of ties in a weird way. Like there's this funny scene where Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera and Trotsky are all like running around playing grab ass, trying to get this uptight Stalinist guy to join their polycule. And he's like, I don't know about this. So it ties in strange ways that we weren't expecting. So that'll be out soon too. Also, Sean recorded a new History is a Weapon last night with a very special guest. And that will also be out very soon for everybody.
Ooh, I'm Trotsky.
Literary Hangover coming out, recording on Thursday on The House of the Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Very interesting book about how terrible inheritance is. So look forward to that.
All right.
Both and.
646-257-3920 is the number. Turn on the IMM machine right now. See you in the fun half. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
I had to use the lavatory, do you see? It was so funny because we actually timed it. And I said, Sam, do you need to use the bathroom in the break? And he's like, no, I don't. And then 40 seconds later, he's like, oh, my God, I need to use the bathroom. Can you guys get a libertarian to call in while I'm in there? Thank you. I would appreciate that greatly, do you see?
We're working on it.
Are we on there?
Yeah, we're on.
Oh, there we go.
Welcome to the Fun House.
Sorry, folks. sometimes that creeps up on you, and you're not aware of it. Teachers in L.A. on strike day 2, I guess now, and this is aerial footage from yesterday. The superintendent of schools said there was about 3,500 people out there striking. This is other reports say closer to 20 to 30,000. This is a lot of people.
And they're striking for company Bentleys and an
Right,
upgrade to about like 0.5 million a year.
In the cafeteria.
Caviar in the cafeteria, 2-hour workday.
Honeycrisp apples.
These are just there's I think slightly more than 3,500 people there as it stands, and this is
these people are amazing. They're doing this for all of us.
People going out in the rain in Los Angeles is one of those things you rarely see.
People in Los Angeles. Waz has lived in L.A. for maybe just a year now, right? After being a lifelong New Yorker, and I don't know, I think he went to Pennsylvania for a year or something. And a couple of weeks ago, he's on Twitter being like, "It's like Seattle. It's like Seattle." Like it took him less than a year to be a weak L.A. person whining about the rain.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
It goes pretty quickly. I think that ability to deal with the weather. But they continue to strike. Part of the story is not just that there is no dedicated system of funding for things like a nurse in elementary schools or a librarian in middle schools. There's also there's reason for the teachers to believe, based upon the way the moves that have been made by the superintendent of schools, that there is going to be an attempt to continue to privatize, and this is a major problem across the country. There is big money to be made in these privatized schools and for-profit charters. The idea, look, here is the classic. I mean, this is an extremely reliable explanation for most phenomena that we see that involve huge amounts of public money, right? Like we have a huge amount of money that is publicly administered in the Social Security system, right? There's people pay in. There is no lockbox per se, but there is basically a line item that is that for all intents and purposes cannot add or diminish the deficit. And Wall Street wants their hands on that money. They call it dumb money. They also want their hands on that money that is collected for schools. Betsy DeVos is on record as saying, "I'm not against public education. I'm against public schools." So in other words, you collect the money in taxes and I will help divert it to private schools. In her case, she really wants the money to end up in parochial schools. But they realize, if some secular schools get the money, that's fine too. That's not going to hurt us. As long as we get enough to fund our madrasas, we'll be okay.
Oh, and I just saw that some defense contractors are getting into the charter school business, so that's fun.
There's a lot of money there. There's a lot of money. It's, private prisons. It's all the same thing. Wherever there is a big pool of money that is going, there's going to be this impetus to privatize it, and it must be obviously these resources must be protected. Let's go to the phones here. Let me just get online. There we go. Calling from a 309 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Mike from Peoria.
Mike from Peoria. What's on your mind, Mike?
I just wanted to let you know how well Glenn Beck is doing nowadays. He's now advertising on your YouTube videos for the Blaze. So,
well, they've got
doing well.
You know, we used to get all the ads from CRTV, and they have merged, and so I imagine it's the same.
Exactly.
I imagine it's the same money.
Well, nobody's doing better after the Alex Jones deplatforming than Glenn Beck himself. All that Coke money had to go somewhere. So Glenn Beck is definitely going to be, getting that money right.
I don't know if
now
it's.
you get
I don't
to
know if
see-
it's Coke money. My suspicion is actually that it's more like either Mercer money or like a Foster Freeze. I don't think it's the Koch brothers who have invested in this.
Well, at least he's filling the void of Alex Jones being gone. But
Right.
Now you get Eric Bowling along with Steven Crowder and Glenn Beck, though. That's big.
fantastic.
You get that neoconservatism mixed in with your Nazi or libertarian worldview. So.
Well, it's always makes it a little more pleasant. Appreciate the call. Calling from a 608 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
My name is Joe. I'm calling from Illinois. I'm a libertarian.
Hello, Joe. What's on your mind?
So you were talking about charter schools, and you mentioned in there that Massachusetts outlawed for-profit charter schools. But you did say in there, I think it was in the article, that that they're kind of charter schools tend to be better when they're nonprofit. Would you agree with that?
I think they're less problematic when they're nonprofit. They don't necessarily perform better when they're not a nonprofit.
Hmm. Okay. Well, you did admit that it's kind of supposed to be the limits are it's not to exclude people, but it's to have a small number, to experiment with a small number of students and see if it works before you consider, replacing potentially public schools with it.
No, that's
And
not what I
think
said.
Really?
I said the idea is to develop teaching techniques that are scalable. And so in Massachusetts, they have the most rigorous controls over the charter schools of anywhere in any other state in the country. They do not allow for-profit charter schools. They do not have even, they have not even devolved control locally. It's all on the state level. Almost everything these charter schools have to be authorized by the state itself, not local school boards, which is very different from other states. And the idea being that you also drain money from the public schools. So, like anything, right? You want to do an experiment, you want to test. I mean, I could make an analogy to what I do with this business. Hey, I want to try some YouTube advertising. Am I going to spend all of our money on YouTube advertising? No, that would be stupid. But if the YouTube advertising works, I'll put in a little bit of money and see if that's a worthwhile endeavor. And on some level, that's what they're doing with the charter schools, to use them as model schools to determine, are there certain pedagogical techniques, are there certain ways of structuring the day that might be helpful to apply to the entire public school system.
All right. Well, thanks for explaining that. I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, I'm not expert in the area, but for what it's worth, I think that one of the possible libertarian solutions to having alternatives to the state involves having experiments like that. Charter schools, voucher systems, for example. Maybe seeing if states can handle their own issues.
Well, voucher systems aren't going to help you at all in that respect. I mean, the charter schools are public schools that are simply they have a different set of rules in which they can do. They have much more latitude relative to public schools. I don't know if much more is really accurate in a state like Massachusetts in particular. In other states, it's different. But vouchers are very different. You realize that charter schools were an idea that were developed by the teachers' union. It's the teachers' union that first, trumpeted the idea of charter schools as a way of experimenting. But unfortunately, they have largely across the country become weaponized. They have become a way of either privatizing education and making money for hedge funds, and or a methodology to break teachers' unions, so that we could pay teachers less, which is sort of almost incomprehensible, but true.
Yeah, I don't want to disparage unions or say that teachers should be paid less or anything. I definitely think there are unions that more deserve to be hated on, like police unions. But, as a libertarian, for what this is worth, I think you're right to call out Elizabeth Warren, and I think progressives have been, kind of middle centrist people who claim to be progressives are kind of screwing with people who are on the real left in the Democratic Party. And
Elizabeth Warren was on the right side of this.
Pelosi years ago.
I wasn't calling out Elizabeth Warren. I was calling out the writer who was critiquing Elizabeth Warren's support for limits on charter schools.
All right, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Excuse me, I have an important question for the caller before he goes. Would you, as a libertarian, support Sam's presence in the 2020 Libertarian debate stage to help clarify these essential matters inside the Libertarian Party and movement? Could you go on record with support for that today?
Yes, I support that because a lot of us are high and can really keep track and aren't paying attention very closely.
Hell
and
yeah.
Point out real world facts.
I appreciate your honesty.
Absolutely my favorite libertarian caller we've ever had.
Easily.
I respect you. I salute you. I love the honesty. I love the integrity. And welcoming Sam to the debate stage, which is, definitely going to be extremely annoying.
I would be
necessary.
proud to have you as my constituent.
Constituent? How about advisor?
Just please promise me to either run with Jimmy Dore or let him convince you into denouncing Hillary Clinton, and you'll have a real shot at it. And you'll have a good chance against the guy with the boot on his head.
All right, appreciate the call.
You know what? I'm hearing
we
coordinator.
denounce Hillary Clinton all the time.
I'm hearing
like
no.
a
Sam doesn't because he's
false flag call. I think
Sam's a Democrat.
You notice Sam gets really silent whenever we talk about the
when we
Clintons.
critique Clinton. Sam's just like, I don't know. She would be a good governor of New York.
I'm not convinced that you wouldn't be a good guy.
Oh. All right, I am.
Calling from an 813.
Speaking of hedge funds,
I'm not
charter
saying today.
schools,
I don't know if I
that's
want.
just so funny. Like
813.
She would really...
no. I don't think she's pro-charter. 813. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Manny from Tampa, Florida.
Manny, what's on your mind?
Hey, I've been listening to Philosophize This podcast, and it had 2 episodes about winning an argument, and it described different types of logical fallacies. But I'm trying to study immigration law, and I was just wondering that in real life, these tactics work in politics or in everyday conversation. And I was wondering what was your opinion, and when you're debating libertarians, like what's your opinion? That's pretty much it.
All right, I appreciate the call. I'm not 100% sure I know what the question is, but when I'm debating libertarians, my approach is just to talk about reality for more than 3 minutes, and then things start to go south for most libertarians, is what I find. It's a theoretical worldview is all well and good, and that's fine, but you have to be able to transfer it into reality. And I'm not sure I would want the libertarian utopia, but I'm quite sure it's impossible. And I'm even more sure that every step along the way to that utopia makes for more human suffering. And so that's basically it. Calling from a 651 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Alex from Minneapolis.
Hello, Alex from Minneapolis. What's on your mind?
And I just want to say I'm a huge fan of the show. I've been listening for about 6 months now. I love you guys. I love Michael Brooks' show.
How did you find the show?
But I just wanted
Alex.
I just kind of stumbled across it, just kind of accidentally.
On YouTube?
Yeah, on YouTube.
Okay.
But I think because I'm a huge fan, I think you said something that was factually incorrect earlier about charter schools. So I just wanted to double check. But I think you said that the vast majority of charter schools are for profit, if I heard you right.
I believe my understanding is the majority of them are for profit. Yes.
Okay. And I'm a progressive. I'm kind of a rare progressive. I actually believe there's a lot of potential in charter schools. It's actually something like 85% are not for profit. They're actually banned. Private charter schools are banned in a lot of states.
I know that's true in Massachusetts.
Okay. Well, it's something. It's either 84 or 85% are nonprofit. And additionally, the for-profit designation is actually kind of a mischaracterization because like there's the KIPP charter network, and they're managed nationally by a for-profit company, but the individual schools are nonprofit, and there's no government money going to the network. They've raised their money with private donations and that kind of thing. So I was just wanting to make sure that we're factually correct about charter schools because there's a lot of
fair enough. But do you have a sense of and look, I'm not against the existence of charter schools. Okay, I think it's super important that they be that they have a model like we have in Massachusetts. Okay, where there is incredible oversight of these schools, where there's full accountability, is much healthier. Like I say, I think there is value in charter schools as laboratories, but not as replacements. And
100%.
And you got to keep that balance there. And the laboratories have to be stuff that's scalable. Now, one of the things that happens with nonprofits, okay, is that you will establish a nonprofit charter school. And then what you will do is you will buy the underlying real estate as a for-profit company. And that charter school will then rent that real estate. I mean, there's a lot. Let me put it this way. There's a lot of different ways in which you can use a nonprofit entity as a way of making money for-profit entities. Now, I don't know the statistics on this, but it is not a rare enough phenomena that you couldn't Google and find more information on that. Go ahead.
And I totally agree. I think there should be a lot more regulation. I think charter school teachers should be unionized. I think I'm not sure if it's Denver or if it's Colorado, but charter schools can't rent from like a commercial real estate. They have the buildings themselves are run by the district.
Right.
The other
problem that we have, like in a place like
I totally agree with all that.
According to Diane Ravish's piece, I think 90% of charter schools are non-union. So that's a big. I mean, I agree with you, but that's
the vast majority.
That's
are
a
definitely
big
non-union
number.
And that's the only reason Republicans are supporting charter schools.
Well, that's exactly right.
Teacher unions.
And part of the problem too is in a city like New York, we have charters that because they're associated with big money, they have a lot more political clout. They end up taking physical space from New York City public schools. I mean, on the whole, like I say, I think there's value to charters. The problem is that they've been weaponized as a means both to undercut the unions, but also to privatize education. And a lot of kids are left behind. I mean, it's just the reality of it. The charters, generally speaking, do not have the same requirements in terms of servicing the broad public as normal public schools. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
It's true.
There's a myth that they can be selective about who they accept, and that's
no.
I mean, that's
first of all, they're self-selecting insofar as like you need parents who are either more engaged than other parents or have more ability to be engaged, right? I mean, just in terms of the process.
That's true. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, and then on top of that, charters have the ability broadly speaking, like I say, in a place like Massachusetts, maybe somewhat diminished, but broadly speaking, they're not required to service the broad spectrum of students. You can get kicked out of a charter school. You can't get kicked out of the public school system, or I should say the threshold is much higher or lower, depending on how you
it definitely
conceptualize it.
I think. I think they have to accept anyone who applies, just like any other school.
Theoretically, right? But charter schools are selective, and so and they don't necessarily have a transparent system in which people are accepted. I mean, look, there are problems with this even in the public school systems here, and it's a far more transparent process. But Ava Moskowitz is not allowing people to sit and audit, who's getting into certain schools. I mean, we have a lot of evidence of this stuff, of teachers who are told by administrators, yeah, we can't explicitly kick this person out, but if you can discourage the parent enough, the kid will be gone. And that's what happens.
Okay.
And they don't have the same internal processes in which to report these things. There's just not the same level of accountability. I mean, all the issues that people have with, like, it's harder to fire teachers in the public school system, and there's redress and whatnot. Well, those also are, they're cumbersome, but they're there for a reason, because you have administrators in schools who are highly political, or can be. You have administrators in schools who are competing to try and get, back in the day, federal funds based upon their performance. And so there's an incentive for them to jettison kids who are trouble. I mean, this is we've just come out the other side of this, and we still haven't fixed it. But
and some progressives, I think their solution is just to ban charter schools altogether, when I would say it's more just make charter schools, give them teacher unions and regulate them and give them this accountability rather than just ban them outright.
Well, look, I mean, I would agree with that broadly. Okay. I mean, we need to see the specifics, but the problem is that you're arguing against forces that are bringing a lot more to bear in this fight than the more nuanced take that you have. And so, it's not necessarily, it's sort of a binary choice in a lot of these situations.
You also have to remember, you can't just give teachers a union, like from a top-down policy level. Like, the teachers at charter schools that have unions, they've had to fight for them. And the charter schools don't want them to have unions.
But the point is that you could say, as a state, we're not going to fund any non-union schools.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's what you could do. And but I get.
Wait, say that last part again. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, theoretically, the state could say, we will not issue a charter unless you have a union and unless your teachers are unionized. I mean, you could theoretically do that. And
that's a great idea. I think.
No, I agree with you. But my point being that in these political battles, it's sometimes a little bit more binary, and sometimes you have to, quash and then build up, to do it the right way. But I mean, but in the main, I've been, pretty clear on this for years, that I think there is value to charter schools. The problem is that in practice, a lot of things have gotten out of hand. But I appreciate the call.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank
you. And you can go back and listen to we've done a lot of shows on, not necessarily charters specifically, but to some extent charters, but with a lot of educators. We haven't had many on
also,
I
would say,
late, but.
I mean, I don't know the national number, but 80% of Michigan is private in terms of their charters, and that's obviously what Betsy DeVos is trying to do nationally. And I'll never. I mean, I'm sorry for the Tom Friedman, but when I was in Detroit, getting into a lift with a woman who was also a full-time public school teacher was just like, what the fuck? That's insane.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, considering all the problems that charter schools can and do cause, like, isn't there a way for the government to experiment with new kinds of education without leaving it to the private sector? Like,
Yeah.
is there a different way for them to do that?
Well,
It seems like there is.
Well, that's what the charter schools were set up to be originally. I mean, it's not, it's not, theoretically, they're still public schools. It's just a question of what constraints are you going to put on these schools that get public money. And so they're not all run by private companies. I mean, some are run by, universities. Some are run by just consortiums of educators. You can have good charter schools that are funded by the state that are accountable to the state. The problem is that too often they're set up to have a lack of accountability. But there should be no for-profit schools. And people should also be clear. The designation of for-profit doesn't mean that people who aren't working there are not making money. It just means they don't have shareholders.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it means they're slaves.
It means they're slaves.
But there is. I mean, there was like near in Holyoke, they created a Paulo Freire charter school based on his ideas for radical education. And
you could have good.
Yeah, so it's not. Of course, and I do think it does stand. My understanding is that Massachusetts is significantly well regulated, and it is a better performance and better situation. And it has, at least in the area where I grew up in, it did bleed into the public schools. They started doing more arts programs. They started dealing with different learning styles and cognitive diversity better. Like, it actually worked the way it was supposed to because it was so regulated and nonprofit and public spirit driven.
Speaking of slavery,
Constitution.
So it comes out. You remember that court case that Rand Paul was involved in, where he got beat up by his neighbor for being such a jerk or something? I'm not sure. I don't know the details of this, and this is not Judge Judy. I don't care.
I believe there was a leaf raking dispute.
Judge Judy, he's denying first principle.
It's possible Rand Paul was upset because this guy had hybrid peach trees and thinks that's the way that our bodily fluids are being drained from us. Who knows? But Rand Paul had he's got a lawsuit against his neighbor, and the Louisville Courier-Journal reported that there was a revelation in these papers about a surgery scheduled for a week from now or so, 2 weeks from now, January 21st. Maybe Paul was going to be out of town or something. I don't know exactly why it would be in these papers. But and the interesting about it is, as you know, we have the greatest healthcare system in the world. Princes come from all around the world to come here to get their health care. However, libertarians apparently go to the socialized medicine mecca of Canada when they need hernia surgery. He is headed to Canada to have surgery at the Shouldice Hernia Hospital, which I don't know exactly where in Canada it is, but it's going to cost $8,000. He's going to buy it. He's going to pay for it because he's not a Canadian citizen. You can go in, you can pay for the services. I imagine a Canadian, if they wanted to, could go pay for the services. But if you were Canadian, it would be covered. I guess the reason why it was in this thing, because it was related to the injuries he suffered when he was beat up. And it is a privately owned hospital, right? But almost all of its work is done under contract with the Ontario government in Canada. So in other words, it runs under the auspices of a single-payer system. Privately owned hospital that is paid for its services either by an individual who decides, because he's coming from another country because he's a libertarian and only he wants to try some of this good old socialized health insurance, and the system it supports is going to pay for himself. But if he was Canadian, he could go to that same hospital And the hospital would take the money, the payment from the Ontario government, because it accepts Ontario's hospital insurance plan, which is part of the nation's public health care system.
Maybe it's like how Alex Jones smokes pot once a year just to remember how bad it is.
Right.
I got to keep aware.
You got to stay aware. Now, I will remind you, the disgusting part about this, okay, is what it says.
Rand Paul?
What Rand Paul is doing. Because the employees at this hospital, it's a privately run hospital, but you understand they are paid predominantly. There are people like Rand Paul who come in and pay, but the vast majority of the business they do is accepting payments from the Canadian government under their single payer system. And we all know what these doctors are. They're not just doctors. They're not just Canadian doctors. Rand Paul will tell you what they are because of the single payer system.
With regard to the idea of whether or not you have a right to a health care, you have to realize what that implies. It's not an abstraction. I'm a physician. That means you have a right to come to my house and conscript me. It means you believe in slavery. It means that you're going to enslave not only me, but the janitor at my hospital, the person who cleans my office,
everyone,
the assistants who work in my office, the nurses. If you have a right to their services, basically, once you imply a belief in a right to someone's services, do you have a right to plumbing? Do you have a right to water? Do you have a right to food? You're basically saying that you believe in slavery. You're saying you believe in taking and extracting from another person. Our founding documents were very clear about this. You have a right to pursue happiness, but there's no guarantee of physical comfort. There's no guarantee of concrete items. In order to give something concrete or someone's surface, you got to take it from someone. So there's an implied threat of force. If I'm a physician in your community and you say you have a right to health care, do you have a right to beat down my door with the police, escort me away, and force me to take care of you? That's ultimately what the right to free health care would be. If you
Now, wait a second. Put aside the fact that the hypocrisy involved in this, right, with the going to the Canadian, because he's getting service from people he believes are slaves.
He's literally personally using
slave labor.
He
is personally taking advantage of these slaves. But does that mean, according to Rand Paul, if I have a right to property, that I can take any of your stuff? I mean, if I have a right to property, does that mean that I can necessarily conscript all your stuff? Is that right absolute that I can actually force you to get? I have a right to property. Give me your bag. It's absurd. It's just an absurd construction.
Well, if he wants to talk about slavery and coercion, which does he think is more coercive? A system where everybody works a decent amount and gets free health care that they need as a form of social insurance, or a society where people have to work 2 jobs or they starve to death and they don't know that they're going to have
you don't have
healthcare.
a right to food or health care, but the absurdity of his argument is just that the idea that people having a right to health care is a right that necessarily has to be fulfilled by specific individuals. I mean, it's just absurd. It's just absurd. I have a right to property, and that obligates the state to defend property that is mine, that has been acquired by means in which the state deems to be appropriate.
I just appreciate
that. Does not mean that I have the right to go and take your Puma shirt. Because I have a right to property. That's just absurd.
That'd be so funny.
Well,
it's just absurd.
He starts the theft in the wrong place, right? Like when you talk about, he thinks that taxes are theft, right? And, the majority of taxes come from the wealthy and the corporations, right? I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that's a lot of taxes. But where does he think they got that money in the first place? Well, they got it from exploiting other people's labor.
Yeah, but even before that, whose money is it?
Well, yeah. Why does that money have
value?
You
don't have the right. You don't have the right to take the dollars out of your pocket and burn them. You can get arrested for that. It's because it's not your money.
Remind me the next time I light a spliff, bro.
Right. I mean, this is just absurd. The idea that this guy is like, responsible for such a significant portion of our legislation, right? Like, as a senator relative to everybody else around us.
Can we take a moment to
It's just
appreciate the
absurd.
fact that the Constitution actually and things like the Federalist Papers are challenging and interesting and, of course, problematic, but also documents that we can work with in some ways, and that the Founding Fathers were not actually, like, if the Constitution literally read, like, first principles are that anything that involves an inconvenience upon me that's the real slavery by your logic. Like, the Constitution and the founding documents gave everybody enough room, or even having people who were like cool from the beginning, like Thomas Paine, where like MLK could be like, this is actually how it is, right? But if they actually wrote like that, that would be a real bummer.
Well, it was
like we were contending the Constitution, but the Constitution really was like, and now a thought experiment.
Exactly.
It was a necessary step in human development, and I think capitalism was an improvement over feudalism, right? The bourgeois state being something that arose with capitalism and upholds it. And there are some good things about liberal values, right? We don't want to get rid of freedom of speech. We don't want to get rid of, all those good ideals that come from the French, right? Liberté, égalité, fraternité. We just want to like do a better job at guaranteeing those rights for real in our next phase of, whatever we come up with.
Rand Paul as Kunta Kinte. I will not treat that sick child. You're like, you will, doctor. You will. Your freedom is not yours. You'll give that boy an inhaler. I will not treat the sick, dying child.
Well, I mean, according to Rand Paul, as soon as you say healthcare is a right, then what will happen is that people will be mandated to go to, they will be mandated to become doctors. Like at birth,
Right.
you will be determined based upon,
It's
I
like
don't know.
some type of sci-fi movie.
Exactly.
Like you go through, like you get screened, and you're like, you will be a doctor. People can go to your house at any time of day. Anybody who works for you, including even doing just paperwork, is also conscripted. That's in the Medicare for All. It's in Bernie's bill. It's like, this is also the surgeons or slaves amendment, so that, in my opinion, anytime you should have so much as a sniffle, you should be able to go to any goddamn doctor's house you
This
want.
is the problem with
and get care.
libertarianism. It's so theoretical
Is that
that
they're
they
fucking
presume too that everything is going to be to function along these sort of like rigid lines, so that that there is no, first of all, there is no absolute right in our society. There's no one who has absolute rights to anything. Like I say, don't have an absolute right to property. Some property is yours, some property is mine. The state intervenes to determine who legitimately owns it. You weren't.
Oh yeah, which court?
You didn't come out of the womb owning that Puma sweatshirt.
Yes, I did, and even talking about it is tantamount to slavery. I'm a United States senator. Fucking think about that for a second.
I know it.
They have a very limited understanding of coercion.
Well, that's also true.
That's the angle that I would usually come at a right-wing libertarian along, because they say that they respect, people's freedom to make voluntary choices or, reject certain choices, as the case may be, but most people don't have that freedom on
that whole thing is sort of like this again gets to the arbitrariness of like the non-aggression principle, right? The non-aggression principle says you cannot touch me, cause me pain by hitting me with your fist. So does that mean if you have a laser, can your laser do it? Can you do it with a stick? Can you do it just by if you have the ability to sort of like what about like those audio? What about those? What was that audio weapon that they used at Zuccotti? No, at Zuccotti Park. They used these sound cannons.
Or can you do it by taking away somebody's health care?
Well, that's my point. Is that like I'm going to collect all the money and keep you from having any money to pay for health care. How's that?
Yeah, it's the violence of the status quo that they refuse to recognize. I don't know why. Maybe some of them are privileged. Maybe they're just dumb. I don't know.
This young girl has a high-pitched fever, and you will treat her, boy. No. Whoa. He just like struggling, like the kid is about to die, and they're trying to force the stethoscope into Rand Paul's hands. He's just like, you cannot.
It starts before that. It starts before that. She is sick. Now sit down, start reading how to become a doctor. You're going to stay here, and you're going to study, and then you're going to do well on that test. And then you're going to start surgery.
Before you know it, you're going to be a goddamn brain surgeon. There ain't nothing you can do about it.
Press gang people like a pirate into being doctors. Just a ship full of pirate doctors.
Tell you now, boy.
There's an underground railroad to bring people out of Canada. So
I'll tell you now, boy. You start cutting into that man's brain. Fix his brain.
Looks like that child's got eczema. I think you better get him a steroid prescription right now.
Bring me the switch.
There's an underground railroad where we can charge over for plastic surgery. We can get people on a secret tunnel out of Canada for freedom. So doctors can have liberty.
Let's go to the phones calling from an 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Josh from Chicago.
Josh from Chicago. Nice to hear you from you again. What's going on?
Oh, thanks for the enthusiasm, Sam.
Oh,
from
my
New York.
pleasure. Yeah.
I wanted to talk today. You guys talked about that stupid Ana Navarro thing. She said she was talking about how Democrats need to provide Bill
Love
Kristol
juice.
and her someone she can vote.
Right.
Is it Love Juice?
Right.
Love juices.
Okay. That's a very disturbing thought. I guess the thing that I am wanting to know from you guys, over the past few days, I've gotten into arguments with centrist Democrats, mainly about either they're anti-Bernie or they don't think that the party should go left. And I'm wondering, even like progressives who aren't nearly as left as I am, do you think that we need to start treating some of these centrists in the same way that we treat the Ana Navarros of the world, even though they are technically, I guess, on our side, just because their arguments are essentially for Biden and other candidates are pretty asinine and actually.
But what's the argument? What's the argument that we need to have this to appeal to? All right. Yeah.
Yes.
Tell them. Show me the data. Show me the data. There was a report done by Data Progress just recently. I think they did it. It was commissioned by Move On, that showed that people who ran and on the policy of Medicare for all, it in no way impacted their electability. Like I think there's a perfectly legitimate argument that running on Medicare for all won't necessarily enhance electability. I happen to disagree with it, but I think there's an argument for it. But there is clearly no argument that someone's going to be rejected by the general population because, and particularly swing voters, it's quite conceivable that your friends will say, well, actually, I'm against this being so left, and so I'm going to agitate again. It's going to impact my vote. But the swing voters, they don't vote on ideology. There is nothing that they say. They don't say, this Medicare for all. I don't subscribe to that. I'm not voting for that. No, the people who won't vote for Medicare for all are the people who aren't going to vote for Democrats anyways. Those people in the middle, they are the last people to be concerned about ideology.
Not to mention all the people who don't normally vote who could hypothetically carry a candidate
Yeah.
like Bernie to victory.
I don't even think you need to raise that in the context of that argument, but I think that's true, that it's conceivable at least you could bring more people in to vote. But there's nobody on the sidelines going like, I'm only going to vote to stop single payer. There's nobody's like, I've been completely, I don't pay attention to politics. I don't feel like it can do anything for me. That's why I don't vote. But if they're going to go for single payer, that's going to motivate me to get out and vote against it. That's not going to happen. It is conceivable. I don't know that there's necessarily hard evidence of this, but it is conceivable that someone say like, oh, wait a second, you're going to give me a material benefit? Then yeah, maybe I will vote. That seems a lot more conceivable to me, but there's no data to suggest that there are people in the middle who are voting based upon, ideology against ideology. That's just a fallacy. It's just a fallacy. There weren't people who voted against Hillary Clinton that voted for Barack Obama because they felt that Hillary Clinton was to the left, except for maybe based upon race.
There are no good faith arguments against single payer at this point in time. If somebody is arguing against it, they're either a useful idiot to the right, I guess they're ignorant, or they are actively your enemy.
Or they oppose slavery.
I mean, but more to the point in terms of electability, there's just simply, you just got to say like, where do you get what? That's just what you're feeling. You're just talking about yourself. You're not talking about
policies.
Yeah, like anybody who claims that Joe Biden is more electable because of his politics is talking out of their ass. You could say like, well, Joe Biden has a much more likable personality if you wanted to, and that's why I think they could win. That's actually probably a more accurate statement than people are saying statement. Like people are really, really pining for, a lack of a bankruptcy cram down.
You know, that's the thing, and it just continuously shocks me because I think sometimes, like, for those of us who actually do have a more, ideological agenda in a good sense, we're like I always say, I think Obama would have beat Trump, and in some ways that's hard for both sides of the argument, which I think is a false argument anyways, but people who focus on, Hillary lost because she's a corporatist and you got to assure people on economic issues, which is true, and then also the massive upsurge of racism and so on, right? And I think for both sides of that equation, it's difficult because Obama's a centrist and he's African-American and he would have beat Trump. And the reason he would have beat Trump, in my opinion, is because he's really frigging charismatic and a great candidate. And there's another element of this stuff.
Well, there's also a lot of evidence
in the same way that AOC appeals to a lot of people outside of, who aren't necessarily as left because she's just a really, likable, appealing, great politician. And frankly, I really don't like Joe Biden, but I think that's very sound. If you say, yeah, I think people are looking for prison expansion and anti consumer protection laws, of course not. But can Joe Biden maybe resonate with certain kind of voters in good ways? Yes,
and I will also say though that in terms of Obama and the race thing, Obama had to talk about race much less than Hillary Clinton, or did talk about race much less than Hillary Clinton, and that's one of the things that came out in
no doubt, in the sides.
Back to the original question though, as to whether like a centrist Dem at this point who says they're not going to vote for a Democrat who supports single payer, or Democrats shouldn't support single payer because people won't vote for it.
That wasn't the question.
They are not that different than Anna Navarro. And if you're going to try to realign the party to the left and include more quote unquote socialistic ideas, it's going to have to shrink a little bit on the right. And those people can either like get with the program and come along, bend the knee, so to speak, or they can get out.
Yeah, but that wasn't the
question was like, should we treat these people differently than we treat Anna Navarro?
Well, I think the point is we shouldn't be going and getting moving to get Anna Navarro and Bill Kristol. But the idea that you need to have a more centrist candidate to win is just not. It's just simply not. There's no data to support that.
Yeah, well, he's saying like, are these people saying these arguments, are they better than Anna Navarro just because they call themselves Democrats? And I say no.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, can I just add one thing? That
No.
There was a poll recently that showed 52% of Republicans support Medicare for all, or a high percentage of Republicans support Medicare for all. And as we've heard on the show from people who've called in, a lot of former conservative people have had come to Jesus moments where they've either had problems with the American healthcare system and realized the value of a more progressive economic policy, or as my friend who's a former Republican, he literally had a come to Jesus moment where he woke up and is now a Medicare for all supporting the left Democrat. And so
because of the Gillette commercial.
Well, Josh, all right, well, listen, I got to jump here, but let me just say this. You can look at something that says Republicans support Medicare for all, 52%, but when that starts becoming a program that is presented by a Democrat, I bet you that number drops in half. And the same reason why Republicans support the wall now 12 to 15% more than they do 12 months ago.
I have to have a touch more. I think
there's so much
we'll
data
see.
suggests that if you present a program and say
no,
Donald Trump presented it versus Barack Obama,
there's no doubt about
that's
that.
Just the
there's
that's
no
just
doubt about
the reality of our politics.
But the dynamics of a program that, I mean, it's, the reason that you'll unfortunately probably be right about that is just purely because of the trust barrier. But I think if you did like a real grassroots campaign on it and went door to door, and I can say anecdotally, like, it wasn't that long, but I did do a day for Medicaid expansion in Idaho. And when and they knew. They would say,
I think that
they
also,
would say, like, I know you guys are left. I know you Democrats, but you know what? Everybody needs health care. You're absolutely right. And when it's as simple and as tangible as that, and with people who are a credible messenger, which is a Bernie advantage and potentially a Warren advantage, it might flip those dynamics a bit.
I think that's the point when Dayan also said, focus on the issues, because as soon as it starts getting wrapped up in partisan politics on some level, it becomes problematic. And not just, D or R, it's left or right. I mean, so that's just one of the realities of our. I mean, for instance, let's talk about this new. I mean, this is how absurd our politics have become, and become is the wrong word. I mean, it's been like this for almost 2 decades now, at least, maybe more. But the centrality of this is also fascinating, and I think part of this is because of the government shutdown right now, because in the absence of an argument over policy, and there doesn't seem to be any arguments left, right, about the government shutdown. It's not until, like I said earlier, people, wealthier people, start feeling the pain will we hear the stories of the most marginal who are feeling the pain. So it's really air travel. But right now, and this is going to seem bizarre to a lot of you, the right wing is up in arms about this web ad for, is it for Gillette? Now, you know how like they had that slogan, Gillette is the best a man can get. Well, Gillette has done a short film on essentially toxic masculinity, right? Which is, I think it's it's a glib term, but there is a problem when you have the overwhelming number of mass shooters are male, when you have a tremendous amount of domestic abuse perpetrated by males. Sure, there are examples of the opposite, no doubt. That's not to diminish it. When you have the incredibly high incidence of rape and sexual harassment, when you have environments that are difficult for women because of the attitudes of men there, when you all of this, it's a problem for society. So I understand it's not a problem necessarily for all men. And it may not be a problem for some women, but as society as a whole, it's a problem. And So a corporation sees that. They decide we're going to take a position because it's going to help our sales. I don't think that Gillette is a particularly good company because of this. But
yeah, if you just buy Gillette just because of this, you're buying into a broader logic that's a
right.
problem.
But with that said,
no, it's a good ad.
I don't think it's bad for this message to get out there. Right.
Brands move. This is a very dope boys. It's symbiotic. It's a very dope boys conversation, and it's like you praise the brand for moving in the right cultural space and forwarding things, but you also don't fall for the bigger hustle of like, well, here's how I don't
even have to praise the brand. I can just say you got to have something wrong with you if you're upset about a Gillette commercial that says men shouldn't be abusive to people. Play this.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual harassment.
Masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too
long.
long.
Now pause it. Let me just explain what we just saw. We saw a kid, a boy, crying, and the implication is he's been bullied by being called a freak.
And a sissy.
But whatever it was. And then we see, some sitcoms that are, the joke is about a woman's ass or breasts or something like that. I mean, stupid stuff. Some stuff that we would just look at is like, you got to be moronic in this day and age to think that's funny. That's incredibly cruel. There are kids who are really bullied in school. And certainly bullying happens with girls, without a doubt. I know this for a fact. But again, the message here is, hey, we used to have an image of our product that we think is anachronistic, and we want to update it. And we want to say that there's certain things that maybe that concept of the best a man could get was a little bit, maybe a slightly problematic, or at least was not aggressive enough in saying, there's some responsibilities, whatever, but continue.
We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy? What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says
that's cool.
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie. Come on.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Bro, not cool, not cool.
Some already are. In ways big and small.
I am strong.
I am strong.
But some is not enough.
It's not how we treat each other, okay? Okay.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
Disaster! Man, the parakeet!
Wow. I wish that Mad Men had gone far enough into the future for a very old Don Draper to have to deal with this kind of advertising culture.
He would have made the ad.
Well, yeah, but he would have felt very conflicted about it.
Hey, we've got to stop bullying.
I know
each
the way
other.
out of this.
I don't like bullying.
This is, I mean, you look at this and the amount of outrage that has been, I mean, I just like, what possibly, how could you possibly get upset about that ad?
If you love toxic masculinity.
I mean, honestly, like
it's
what
chaos.
What do you
it's chaos, Sam?
It's inhibiting boys' ability to beat each other up at a barbecue.
Well, according to a very smart YouTube commenter, all of you guys on this show have actually been feminized by your exposure to radical feminism. So for that, I must apologize.
I do remember Rush Limbaugh complaining about the fact that people wearing pink ties. That was feminizing. Of course,
The
now
more
I don't.
aggressive, psychopathic boys, they simply don't care.
Oh, by the way, I will be wearing a pink tie at the TMBS live show on February 1st.
Is that right?
Yes.
I mean, this is
absolutely right.
Jordan
For that
Peterson-
purpose?
No, it was the wardrobe choice plan before this, in fact.
You've planned out your wardrobe choice?
Yes, Sam. I
month-
take these, and don't bully me for it.
That'll keep
Freak.
the testosterone flowing.
You know what?
Hey,
I have
hey.
a real problem with that Gillette ad.
Yeah. Hey, that's not what we do.
Harry's would never do anything like that.
No, we don't bully in this office.
Yeah. A lot of time for a lot of self-assessment around here.
Can we just hear
across the board.
Donald Trump pontificate on the Louisiana Purchase? What context was he talking about this? He's in New Orleans and he's getting this is a speech. He's talking about basically trying to, I guess, in some respects, cover for the government shutdown, assuring farmers, don't worry, help is on the way, except for it's not. But here he is. He's going to explain to us about Louisiana Purchase. Well, he's reading this, right? This is not extemporaneous.
Not only did we gain New Orleans, we doubled the size of the United States. We secured new parts and ports, new parts of the map and globe that we never thought.
Yeah,
and
that's
new
when
ports,
he fell
very
off.
important.
There he goes. That's what happens, right? He's got this prepared statement, and we gained new ports, and then he realized, like, parts and ports, parts of the country and ports.
Parts and parts.
So important. Ports are places where boats go back and forth in a port. Here he is talking about, again, getting lost in his teleprompter in the same speech, talking about farmers, trying to explain to farmers why the wall is important, despite the fact that they're not getting the slush fund that is necessary because of his trade barriers.
Thank you. As president, the defense of our nation is my highest and most important duty. And this is the defense of our nation, just like we prepare for other nations that you think more traditionally is what that sentence refers to. When it comes to keeping the American people safe, I will never, ever back down. I didn't need this fight. This is a rough fight.
Can we go back to the beginning? Is it because this is the problem. It's like he tries to go off the script and then he just gets completely lost. Take it again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As president, the defense of our nation is my highest and most important duty. And this is the defense of our nation, just like we prepare for other nations that you think more traditionally is what that sentence refers to.
Exactly.
When it comes to keeping the American people safe, I will never, ever back down. I didn't need this fight. This is a rough fight. We're dealing against people who think that if they can stop me from building the wall, again, we've already done a lot of work, but they think that's a good thing for 2020 because they're not going to win. They think if they can stop me from building the wall, that's good. This is the reason why they don't want the wall built, because they all know it works. They all approved it numerous times. I mean, Chuck Schumer had his hand up every time this would come up. The senators know this. They're only doing this because of the 2020 election, because I said I'll build the wall, and I'm going to build the wall, and it's only one of many things that I promised. I mean, if you look at...
I was able to make a lot of promises. Mexico going to pay for the...
Got you the biggest tax cut beyond the Ronald Reagan tax cuts. ANWR, getting rid of the individual mandate, the biggest cuts in regulations in the history of our country. And
there you go. Wow.
Well, I mean, part of it is true, right? Like, the Democrats did say Chuck and Nancy did say we need better border security, which was a real groaner moment. And that's why we need someone like Bernie who can't be forced to own the dumb things that the Democrats have done or be made to look like a hypocrite by this idiot.
Well, I don't know that Bernie wasn't on board with that, wouldn't have voted for that deal had they made it last year for DACA and whatnot. I'm sure
he probably would have, but I think that it's really important actually to, look, there has to be a discourse on this that is in between like a future utopian goal of no borders and like kowtowing to Republican fascist talking points today. And I think that just like part of these litmus tests could be like, do you support demilitarizing the border? Like, what kind of border are you actually talking about is a major difference in policy that I want to see all of them start to differentiate themselves
but
on.
Mainstream
the reality
Dems don't
is,
want to demilitarize.
Look,
whatever the case may be.
I don't know. I mean, the reality is, though, right now, is that the Republicans control 2/3 of the lawmaking ability, and so the question is, what position do you take? I don't agree with the rhetoric of the Democrats. I think they need have an actual immigration policy that lands somewhere, rather than just sort of these empty rhetoric because they're
Republicans are going to say
afraid
it's
of it.
socialist
But
anyways.
the American public is, let me put it this way. I don't think the Democratic Party, in saying that we're all for border security, is frankly too distant from the vast majority of the American public. I mean, maybe you have polling that shows that the vast majority of the American public doesn't want border security.
Definitely not. But
I haven't seen that.
But could it be like polls on gun control, where most people, if you like, the top layer is like, oh, I'm moderate or maybe even like conservative on guns, but if you actually go down into the actual specific proposals,
the support may be weak for what border security is.
I would imagine most Americans want a border, but they want to protect DACA.
Do you think there should be border security?
Yeah, of course.
I would imagine that it polls somewhere around 75 to 85%.
But like more border security, because that's what Chuck said.
If you said the words more border security, I would imagine you would get 75 to 85%.
Because also, I mean, I've seen some polls where Americans are generally supportive of immigration.
I think they are generally.
I don't think they see a contradiction.
I don't think they see a contradiction there at all. I mean, it's certainly been the process that we've had in this country for the vast majority of it. So I don't think they see a contradiction in it. I mean, the reality is to expect the Democratic Party to be more progressive than, at least in terms of rhetoric, than 75% of the country, or whatever that figure is, I think is just, it would be nice.
I think an area,
I think Democrats can be pushed in that way, but I think they need an immigration policy.
Right, and I think they could lead a little bit by saying we're going to have,
without a doubt,
a strong, secure, blah, blah, blah border, the stuff you need to say, but we're also not going to handle this. Like, it's not a military threat. And we're not going to talk about it like a military threat. That's inaccurate.
Right.
And so on.
Yeah. And also we're going to get rid of ICE because it serves no purpose other than to terrorize
the
already marginalized population.
Any movement to get rid of ICE, it's coming from the Democrats. To
well,
the extent
that's
that
another one that we got to be really clear about what they mean by it, right? Because they're all saying it, but then there's going to be a lot of devil in details on that one.
I think there's enough rhetoric going on that in the event that there is a Democratic president and a Democratic House and Senate, you're going to see reforms. And to what extent those reforms happen, we don't know. But, all right, lastly, as we're talking about Democrats, this come up, and of course now there's a lot of stuff coming up about Tulsi Gabbard now that she has declared.
Are you going to fucking smear her?
I'm going to smear her by playing this interview that she gave on NDTV. What is NDTV?
It's Indian.
Indian TV. And this is in 2014.
Which I don't give a fuck about, by the way, India.
Now, she's not gone full. Well, actually, yeah. Now, let me just say this. For there are people who are really upset about us playing this video and criticizing her position. The first thing you got to think about is how many times you have called or written into the show, or I am the show, to complain about what I have said about Sam Harris's defense of torture. Because the defense of torture that Tulsi Gabbard offers here is identical to the one that Sam Harris offered in 2004. Identical. In fact, it's almost the identical example that she uses as to why it should be justified.
Also the popular television program 24.
Also, yes. But here she is on Indian TV in 2014.
Let me ask you, in the end, as a soldier, how do you respond to the much discussed report on the CIA's use of torture and what some Americans have called a blot on American values? Do you share that opinion, or as a soldier, do you have a very different perspective on the use of torture?
Very bluntly, I'm conflicted. I'm conflicted on this report. There are, I think the jury is still out on the report itself. There have been comments that there are things missing or it was incomplete, and there are differing opinions on the report itself. But as I think about it myself,
pause it. Incidentally, there were really no differing opinions on the report in terms of did it go too far in talking about rectal feeding, or did it go too far in terms of how much people were waterboarded or forced to stand on limbs, or had dogs sicked on them or whatnot. There was the report, to the extent that there was criticism of the report, is that we weren't allowed to see all of what happened.
About it myself. Clearly, we would not like to see any human, any person around the world being treated inhumanely. On the other side, I can also understand that any of us, if we're in a situation where our family or our community, our state or our country is in a place where, let's say in an hour, a nuclear bomb or an attack will go off unless this information is found. I believe that if I were the president of the United States, that I would do everything in my power to keep the American people safe.
All right, pause it for a second. Now, here's the thing. The scenario she's talking about, in the CIA report, they don't talk about that scenario because there was never that scenario. So you can make up a scenario that has never happened, that cannot happen, because we can never know that we're an hour away from a nuclear bomb going off, right? Unless the guy from Spectre has broadcast it because he likes to brag to James Bond. Right. But we can never know that. And that was certainly not the issue in our torture of people in Iraq. And here's the other thing, is that the president could torture somebody. If you want to torture somebody as president, you can torture them. But that doesn't mean that it should be legal. It should mean that if you think you're saving the world from nuclear catastrophe, you make the decision. I am going to subject myself to prosecution after this, or hope that when everybody realizes I've just saved half the world from nuclear annihilation, that it was worth it, then I'll be fine. Then you make that decision.
I'll go out on a limb, and I will say that if that was actually proven to me, totally would pardon the person
yes,
that
you
did that.
probably would get it.
And I would publicly advocate for that.
But if you make it legal based upon a hypothetical scenario which could exist at every time, right? Every single person you bring in, what if they know that the world's going to get blown up in an hour? We won't know until we torture them.
I'm of mixed minds about this. Spectre is working on a lot of programs, as we know.
Incidentally, again, this is the exact same argument that I had with Sam Harris's. Literally, I think it was entitled An Apology for Torture.
In Defense of Torture.
Or In Defense of Torture.
Which was, of course, an anti-torture program. And if you said it was pro-torture, then you're taking them out of context.
Right, of course.
Of course, naturally.
If I were the president of the United States, that I would do everything in my power to keep the American people safe. So this is an area that I have conflicting feelings on
Although,
it.
of course, there are questions about whether torture actually leads to the correct intel, right?
Yeah.
That debate carries on.
That debate carries on. There are those who are in the position of conducting these interrogations, some who have said
it does work.
It does, and others who have said it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't carry on.
Got to hear both sides.
Like, you must hear both sides. It carries on.
Yeah, I mean, that is...
she's the only Democratic candidate that I'm aware of. And it's not... I mean, look, obviously Clinton and Obama were totally insufficient in terms of holding Bush accountable, and that's probably why we even have this conversation still. But I think she's the only Democrat that's talking about running for president that doesn't just have a priori legal and moral...
Can you
I
imagine
oppose
if
torture.
Joe Biden came out and said this?
Meltdown.
Can you imagine?
Total meltdown.
Can you imagine that there would be anybody who would defend? I don't know.
To be fair, yes. I
Yeah.
could imagine a certain type that would defend him, but those would be the same types that, some people that are standing for her would say would be like the pinnacle of, sellout corporate, and they're right.
The
They
dead
are.
enders.
And so one should, I would say that, torture would be one that should be a pretty basic. If you have any type of remote claim to humane politics, this is going to have to be one that there's no gray area.
What's
on.
funny to me about all the Tulsi backers is how they never miss an opportunity to dunk on Obama because of foreign policy things, like especially drones, but they never mention it with regards to that Tulsi has basically the same drone position as Obama does.
You never, and not only, they never mentioned that she has the same drone position, and then that her only sort of real objection to Obama was that he wasn't heating up the rhetoric in terms of Muslims.
He wouldn't say Muslim terrorism.
Islamic terrorism.
Is that right? Was
she
one
had
of
a
those?
problem with that. Yeah, she had
What's
a problem
her
with
deal?
All right, folks, we've run out of time. I apologize. I can't get to the phones. We have 28 people on hold. Apologies. Didn't get to any IMs. I guess here I'll do 10 IMs right now. Starting with Gilles Gargelet. Can you explain to me why your female buds, Janine and Sarah, can't find any solidarity with the women Louis C.K. has assaulted and or harassed? Keep making excuses for them. It's like when O.J. said, I'm not black, or I'm O.J. If they're not women, they're comedians, or is it just a natural tendency to... Well, I think both Sarah and Janine are... Sarah, I think, statement was pretty good. I think the idea being that they're friends and they probably don't feel that they can be anything but biased in this context. I mean,
I would not put those two responses in the same basket at all.
I wouldn't put them in the same basket, and I make allowances for Janine because I think to a certain extent her perspective is informed by the idea of having a society aligned against you, and I think I've said many times that I think that her experience in being one of the few voices in the country to be publicly anti-war and exposed to what came back from that in the run-up to the Iraq War, I think has sort of informed her her sense of empathy for Louis. I also think that look, within the comedy community, the reality is that people's understanding of these events are informed by more than the New York Times reporting. That's the reality to it, and it's not just coming from Louis. I can tell you that, and I'm not going to traffic in it. It's not relevant, but I can tell you in terms of, there are other people who have a different sense of what happened, at least in one or two of those occasions. Nobody was in the room, but there were people who were around shortly after that, 10, 15 years ago. And, so I don't know that that's informing their perspective on this.
He admitted to doing some bad stuff.
What he admitted to, well, first of all, what he admitted to was his role in that reporting. I can tell you that there is a sense amongst people, particularly with the Aspen event, that the roles of the other people involved were not explicated at the same way. So the actions of one person seen in isolation can look worse than they might be if you don't know the roles of the other people. Now, with that said, look, I raised this just as an explanation for maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, for, particularly for, in Janine's response. I'm not trying to relitigate, what Louis did. And I certainly don't think that the way that he's come back, I mean, people heard, we spoke about that the other day. The way that, his response to it, I think, has been quite poor. Worse than that. But that's, I'm just talking about what people ask me. Why can I explain it? That would be my explanation as to why that they've responded that way.
But also, you guys took a noble stance against the Iraq war, and you got yelled at and savaged for it. That's not really the same thing as, I don't know, Louis, or maybe take a more clear-cut case like Al Franken. People getting mad at them for that is not the same thing at all. And I hope that Janine is able to move past that at some point. Well,
I don't think that she will. I mean, I don't think that I was very in close proximity to that, and I don't think anybody can understand what it's like to, to be attacked and depicted the way that she was. And so I offer a lot of allowances for that.
People's perceptions of reality can be deformed in a variety of ways, and it's just...
Well, I think her perception is of capacity to feel empathy for when you're completely isolated, and she has a friend who's going through that. And so that's what I think that is. I don't think that's necessarily...
you can feel empathy without going on the counterattack, though.
Well, I don't think she was going on the counterattack. She wasn't going on that podcast to defend Louis. And they were pressing her, and she responded. She's not calculating. It's not her job to do that. So, I mean, I think that, it's easy to judge from your perspective. And I have a different one, which I think is, allows for more allowances for Janine. And that's just my opinion on it. Colin from Nebraska. Trump was so happy last night, not because he was able to pay to feed Clemson's football team, but because they left over 300 Happy Meal toys to play with after they left. The Chris Lepaco. Any thoughts on the Alex Jones decision? The judge has forced him to hand over documents pertaining to his coverage of Sandy Hook. What do you think they'll find? I don't know. I mean, what kind of documents
what is he
would you
say
generate?
That he didn't say public. I don't know.
What kind of documents would you generate? We don't generate any
documents. And then
documents.
in the third block, we're going to lie about Sandy Hook. I just want it tightly planned and in writing.
Do you have that down? We're going to lie about Sandy Hook.
Right? Okay. God damn it. We're going to lie is out of my sheet.
I mean, it's conceivable that he writes but I could tell you, if someone was to sort of subpoena all our documents about our coverage of anything here, they would find nothing.
I think the fact that you voted for Trump would be embarrassing.
But I didn't write it down.
Yeah, right.
Spliff Specter. Hey guys, just wanted to give you a heads up that I'll be subtweeting a Rick Wilson retweet of an endorsement of Joe Biden by Nicole Wallace at around 3 p.m. I tweeted this afternoon.
That's a very messy I am.
CTMR Fanzo. Chait did mention his wife's conflicted interest in his Twitter feed, but he qualifies it by saying it does not engage in advocacy. According to one Twitter comment in his feed, his wife's LinkedIn job description says otherwise. Love the show. Disco Stew. Was nice to see Glenn Greenwald on Tucker Carlson last night, this time to join Tucker defending Tulsi Gabbard. Such a good progressive. Oh, my God. I hope that's not the case. Is that right? That is sad.
They both hate Muslims.
Mid-July. Anytime anyone asks how we're going to pay for any type of social programs, I'm going to tell them we're going to socialize the oil industry and watch them freak out. Nick from Manitoba, looks like you could use a haircut there, bud. You're starting to look like Raskolnikov, Rodion Romanovich, when he confesses to his crime to the eccentric detective Porfiry Petrovich.
Crime and Punishment, folks.
Thank
It's
you.
a great book.
Train Boy, regarding yesterday's interview, I think it would be very interesting if you went around the table and each listed your 5 favorite Pullman trains. Mine are the R46, the Superliner 1, the ACMU, the M1001, the M1002. Can't wait to hear your picks.
That
I'm
was
sorry,
mine,
we are out of
in the
time, but
same
those
order.
exactly the same ones. Lead me. What if Michael just needs to enunciate more and more not a problem with his microphone? Lethan Tears. Bolsonaro may be moving to address the Venezuelan refugee crisis soon. The government views Venezuela as they're serious, so expect the absolute worst from Brazil on this crisis. ICE concentration camps times 10. Alex from Ohio. I overheard 2 friends discussing Rogan's podcast. They were talking about how nice it is to have a podcast that talks to all sides without getting too political. One said his favorite guest is Steven Crowder. The other says he likes Jordan Peterson. It took all I had not to say anything. I'm a progressive in a sea of red, and since 2016, I try not to waste my time debating people because it goes nowhere. With the backlash towards announced progressives running for office, I'm starting to give up hope that anyone can win besides Bernie.
We will cover this more tonight, but they've rejected Theresa May's Brexit deal and might be going to elections. So that's a pretty big deal.
Hey, Michael, yesterday I watched TYT talk about Tulsi. What is it? What was the vote?
They rejected it. It's not happening. So they might be going to elections.
Wow.
Absolute
boy. It's
Huge.
really getting intense there. Very, very make or break in all senses.
Hey, Michael, yesterday I watched TYT talk about Tulsi Gabbard and was disappointed that they acted like her problems all happened 15 years ago. Any chance you can ask Anna what she thinks of, say, Gabbard not boycotting Netanyahu's speech to Congress in 2015 when even Tim Kaine didn't go?
We're going to touch on it. Anna and I are going to touch on it.
Clinton Omaha, Candace Owens is challenging AOC to a debate on Twitter. Any interest in debating her, Sam or Michael? Sure.
Oh, Candace Owens, yes. I would do that.
Dr. Chaos, M. Day, would a single-payer health care system help stave off future government shutdowns? I know as an entitlement program, payments for care aren't subject to appropriations in Congress, but does that also apply for their staffing? You know, I don't know. It's very hard to say because it's just a question of what's deemed necessary, employees. Bubba Ganoush, pee breaks sneaking up on you is called an old man's bladder. This is from an old man. I want you to know to get used to it. Thank you. I appreciate that. And the final IM of the day.
Wait, can I read one from Train Boy? It's good.
I just read it from Train Boy.
He has another one. It is the 100th anniversary of the murder of the great left communist thinker Rosa Luxemburg, who really leaned in to her Marxist political economy and made a big difference in the world. Train Boy has sent an IM commemorating it, and he says, in the event you don't get to my call, can you please give a shout out to Rosa Luxemburg and a fuck you to her murderer, who is not only walking free, but representing the state of Vermont in the U.S. Senate.
There you go. All right, and the final IM of the day. Adam Cokehead, sick Dave Rubin Burns on Twitter. Does he still support universal health care and small government? He's a fucking moron. LOL. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,